They called me the family failure, the one who wasted money on useless gadgets in the garage, tinkering with circuits and processors while real life passed me by. My wife Sarah would roll her eyes when she heard the soldering iron heating up again, and my brother Mike never missed a chance to joke about my latest contraption at family dinners. But that day when Empire Corporation CEO Jonathan Walsh looked directly at me across that crowded conference hall and said those words that would change everything, my family's carefully constructed reality crumbled like a house of cards. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as hundreds of tech industry professionals turned to stare, their faces a mixture of awe and recognition that my own family had never shown me. The air conditioning hummed quietly in the background, but all I could hear was the thundering of my own heartbeat as 20 years of hidden work was about to be revealed. Sarah sat frozen in her chair 3 rows behind me, her mouth slightly open, while Mike's usual smirk disappeared completely from his face. The moment hung in the air like morning fog, thick with possibility and the weight of truth finally breaking free. Everything I had built in secret, every late-night sacrifice, every penny saved and invested in components they thought were worthless, was about to vindicate itself in the most public way possible. The corporate presentation screen behind me displayed my invention's blueprint, but they still didn't understand what they were looking at. That was about to change forever. Before I share what happened in that room, I want to know you are here with me on this journey. Just say listening in the comments or let me know where you are tuning in from. I love hearing how far the story reaches, because what happened to me could happen to anyone who has ever been underestimated. The story really begins 5 years earlier, in the cramped 2-car garage behind our modest suburban home on Maple Street. Sarah had been after me for months to clean it out, to make room for her car during the winter months, but I kept finding excuses to delay. She thought I was just being lazy, avoiding the tedious work of sorting through old boxes and forgotten storage. What she didn't know was that every square inch of that garage had become sacred space to me, a laboratory where I was quietly revolutionizing technology while she slept. The workbench along the far wall held my most precious equipment, oscilloscopes and frequency generators that I had bought piece by piece with money I skimmed from our grocery budget. I told myself it was temporary, that once the patent came through I would pay back every penny we had sacrificed. The concrete floor was marked with tape, creating different zones for different phases of development, though to anyone else it just looked like random lines leading nowhere. Sarah worked as a nurse at the county hospital, pulling 12-hour shifts that left her exhausted and increasingly frustrated with my apparent lack of ambition. She would come home to find me hunched over circuit boards, my hair disheveled and my clothes stained with flux, and I could see the disappointment in her eyes growing deeper each day. Her friends' husbands were getting promotions, buying bigger houses, taking vacations to Europe, while she was married to a man who seemed content to play with electronic toys in a dirty garage. I wanted to tell her about the breakthrough I was chasing, about the technology that would change everything, but the non-disclosure agreements I had signed made that impossible. The corporate lawyers had been very clear about the consequences of premature disclosure, even to family members. So I absorbed her frustrated sighs and her pointed comments about responsibility, knowing that someday I would be able to explain everything. Mike was even worse than Sarah when it came to understanding what I was doing. As the regional sales manager for a pharmaceutical company, he measured success in quarterly numbers and commission checks, and he never missed an opportunity to remind me how far behind I was falling. Every family gathering became an informal performance review where he would catalog his latest achievements while subtly highlighting my apparent failures. He had just bought a new BMW, or closed $1 million deal, or been invited to the company's annual retreat in Hawaii, and he would share these updates with the particular tone of voice reserved for motivating lazy relatives. His wife Jennifer would nod along supportively, occasionally glancing at Sarah with the kind of sympathetic look you give someone dealing with a difficult situation. They lived in a house 3 times the size of ours, with a 4-car garage that actually held cars instead of mysterious electronic equipment. The worst part was that I couldn't defend myself without breaking the confidentiality agreements that were protecting my work. The corporate lawyers had made it clear that any premature disclosure, even to immediate family members, could void the entire development contract and leave me with nothing to show for years of effort. So I sat through Mike's indirect lectures about responsibility and ambition, nodding politely while calculating processor speeds and data transfer rates in my head. I would smile when he talked about the importance of having concrete goals and measurable progress, knowing that my goal was so far beyond his comprehension that he would have dismissed it as fantasy if I could have shared it. The irony was that while he was celebrating his incremental victories in a mature industry, I was potentially creating an entirely new industry that would dwarf his pharmaceutical sales within a decade. Our parents had stopped asking about my work altogether, which was somehow worse than Mike's criticism. Mom would simply change the subject whenever my career came up, smoothly redirecting the conversation towards Sarah's nursing stories or Mike's latest business trip. Dad would nod politely when I mentioned working on a project, but his eyes would glaze over with the same expression he wore when forced to listen to children explain their drawings. They had categorized me as the dreamer, the impractical son who would never quite figure out how to succeed in the real world. Family photos from those years show me standing slightly apart from the group, not because anyone excluded me deliberately, but because I had become background noise in my own family narrative. They loved me in the abstract way you love a disappointing relative, with patience and resignation rather than respect or curiosity. The financial strain was constant and growing worse each month. The development costs were higher than I had anticipated, and the timeline kept stretching as the technology proved more complex than my initial calculations had suggested. I was working with cutting-edge processors that cost thousands of dollars each, and when one failed during testing, it represented weeks of grocery money gone in an instant. Sarah noticed when our credit card balances started climbing, when we stopped going out to dinner, when her birthday present came from the discount store instead of the department store. She would find the credit card statements and spread them across the kitchen table, circling the charges from electronic suppliers and asking me to explain what we were getting for our money. I would mumble something about research costs and future returns, but I could see the doubt growing in her eyes with every passing month. The secrecy was eating away at our marriage in ways I hadn't anticipated. Marriage is supposed to be built on honesty and shared dreams, but I was living a double life that made genuine intimacy impossible. Sarah would try to discuss our future, our goals, our plans for starting a family, and I would have to navigate the conversation carefully to avoid revealing information that could jeopardize everything we were working toward. She interpreted my evasiveness as lack of commitment, as evidence that I wasn't taking our relationship seriously enough to include her in major decisions. The truth was exactly the opposite, that everything I was doing was motivated by love for her and the life I wanted to build for us, but the non-disclosure requirements made that impossible to explain. So we drifted apart slowly, two people sharing a house, but not sharing a life. The garage became my refuge from the growing tension in the house. I would slip out after dinner, claiming I needed to organize tools or work on small repairs, and spend hours in my hidden laboratory pursuing the breakthrough that would justify everything. The workbench held equipment that would have impressed engineers at major corporations, but to my family it was just expensive junk taking up space where Sarah's car should have been parked. I had jury-rigged a climate control system to protect the sensitive electronics, running ductwork from the house's central air system in a way that looked accidental, but was actually precisely calculated. The lighting was carefully positioned to eliminate shadows and reduce eye strain during the detailed assembly work that often stretched past midnight. Every tool had its designated place, every component was cataloged and stored according to a system that made sense only to me. The breakthrough came on a Tuesday night in October, during one of those unseasonably warm evenings when the garage stayed comfortable without any heating. I had been working on the same processing problem for 3 weeks, trying to optimize the data flow between the primary processor and the secondary analysis units, when suddenly the solution appeared in my mind fully formed. It was one of those moments that every researcher dreams about, when months of accumulated knowledge suddenly crystallize into a perfect understanding of what needs to happen next. My hands moved automatically, making connections and adjustments that I had never tried before but somehow knew would work. The diagnostic lights began blinking in patterns I had never seen, and then the entire system hummed to life with a sound like distant music. The prototype was working, not just functioning, but performing beyond my most optimistic projections. I sat in that garage until 4 in the morning, running test after test and documenting results that would have seemed impossible just hours earlier. The technology was doing exactly what I had dreamed it could do, processing information in ways that would revolutionize how computers interact with human behavior. I had created something that could predict user needs with unprecedented accuracy, something that would make current artificial intelligence systems look primitive by comparison. The implications were staggering, not just for technology, but for entire industries that depended on understanding human patterns and preferences. I wanted to wake Sarah up and share the moment with her, but the legal restrictions meant I had to celebrate alone, in a garage filled with equipment she considered a waste of money. The patent application process took another 6 months, 6 months of careful documentation and legal reviews that felt like an eternity. The intellectual property lawyers were impressed with the innovation, but cautious about the claims, wanting to ensure that every aspect was properly protected before we proceeded with commercial development. During those months, I continued my garage work, refining the technology and developing additional applications that could demonstrate its versatility. Sarah noticed that I seemed happier, more energetic, but she attributed it to finally getting serious about cleaning up my workspace. She had no idea that her husband was sitting on intellectual property that would be worth more than our house, our cars, and everything else we owned combined. The first corporate interest came through a patent monitoring service that tracked new filings in emerging technology categories. A small tech company in Austin wanted to license certain aspects of the innovation for their mobile applications, offering an advance that would have covered our credit card debt with money left over. But my patent attorney advised waiting, suggesting that the technology deserved a much larger platform and a much more substantial partnership. He had connections in Silicon Valley, relationships with companies that could turn my garage prototype into a global phenomenon. The waiting was agonizing, especially as our financial situation continued to deteriorate, but I trusted his judgment about the technology's potential value. Empire Corporation first contacted us in March, through a senior vice president who had seen the patent filing and recognized its significance immediately. The initial phone call lasted 3 hours, with their technical team asking detailed questions about implementation and scalability that demonstrated they understood exactly what I had created. They wanted to see a demonstration, but not at their corporate headquarters where competitors might notice unusual activity. Instead, they suggested meeting at the National Technology Conference in Chicago, where our conversation would be invisible among thousands of similar discussions happening simultaneously. They would arrange for me to present the technology during one of their corporate showcase sessions, giving them a chance to evaluate it in a realistic commercial context. The invitation to the conference arrived on official Empire Corporation letterhead, addressed to me personally and requesting my attendance as a featured technology presenter. Sarah found the envelope on our kitchen counter and assumed it was another piece of promotional material from a trade organization trying to sell me something. She had become accustomed to seeing my name on mailing lists for electronic suppliers and technology magazines, so corporate correspondence didn't seem unusual to her. But when I opened the letter and read the details, my hands were shaking with excitement and terror. This was the moment when everything would either come together perfectly or fall apart completely. There would be no middle ground, no way to retreat back into the safety of garage anonymity. Mike happened to be at our house for Sunday dinner when I mentioned the Chicago conference, and his reaction was exactly what I had expected. He assumed it was another one of my amateur hobby events, something like a ham radio convention or a computer enthusiast meetup. He made jokes about me finally getting recognition from fellow basement inventors and asked if Sarah was planning to attend my debut on the big stage. The sarcasm was thick enough to cut with a knife, but I absorbed it quietly because I knew that in less than 2 weeks his entire perception of reality would be permanently altered. Sarah was more supportive, encouraging me to go and make some professional connections that might lead to actual employment opportunities. She had no idea that I was about to demonstrate technology that would make employment irrelevant for the rest of our lives. The flight to Chicago was the longest 3 hours of my life. I had shipped the demonstration equipment ahead through a specialized electronics courier service, but I was carrying the core processor modules in my personal luggage because I couldn't risk having them lost or damaged in transit. The technology represented 5 years of development work and financial sacrifice, and it was all contained in a metal briefcase that looked unremarkable to airport security but held the future of human-computer interaction. I spent the entire flight reviewing my presentation notes and running through potential technical questions that the Empire Corporation team might ask. This was my one chance to prove that the garage inventor deserved to be taken seriously by one of the world's largest technology companies. The hotel in downtown Chicago was far nicer than anywhere Sarah and I had stayed together, with a view of Lake Michigan that reminded me how far I had traveled from our suburban garage laboratory. Empire Corporation had arranged for a suite on the executive floor, with a separate workspace where I could set up my demonstration equipment without interruption. The corporate hospitality coordinator called within an hour of my arrival, confirming the schedule for the next day and asking if I needed any additional technical support for my presentation. The level of professional attention was intoxicating after years of being treated as an amateur hobbyist by everyone in my personal life. For the first time in months, I felt like my work was being taken seriously by people who understood its significance. The conference center was enormous, filled with displays from hundreds of technology companies showing off their latest innovations. I walked through the exhibition halls and realized that most of the products being demonstrated were incremental improvements on existing technology, faster processors or smaller components or more efficient software. What I had developed was fundamentally different, not just better but revolutionary in a way that would make entire categories of current technology obsolete. The Empire Corporation booth was located in the premium section near the main entrance, with a presentation theater that could accommodate several hundred attendees. My demonstration was scheduled for Thursday afternoon, during the peak attendance period when industry journalists and corporate decision-makers would be paying closest attention. Wednesday evening, I received a call from Sarah, checking on how the conference was going and reminding me that Mike and Jennifer were planning to join us for dinner on Saturday night. She was worried that I might be networking too aggressively, trying too hard to impress people who were probably just being polite to a small-time inventor. Her concern was touching but also frustrating because I couldn't explain that I wasn't trying to impress anyone anymore. The technology would speak for itself, and by Saturday night our dinner conversation would be very different than she was expecting. I told her I loved her and promised to call again after my presentation, knowing that the next time we spoke I would finally be able to share the secret I had been carrying alone for so many years. Thursday morning arrived with unusual clarity, one of those crisp autumn days when everything seems to be in perfect focus. I spent 2 hours in my hotel room setting up the portable demonstration system, testing every connection and running diagnostic checks on every component. The technology performed flawlessly, responding to commands with the speed and accuracy that had convinced me it was ready for commercial development. I had prepared 3 different demonstration scenarios, from basic functionality to advanced applications that would showcase the system's true potential. Empire Corporation's technical team had requested the full presentation, including applications that were still under development but showed the technology's ultimate capabilities. The presentation theater was packed beyond capacity, with standing room only and people streaming the session through the conference's video system. Jonathan Walsh, Empire Corporation CEO, was sitting in the front row alongside their Chief Technology Officer and Head of Corporate Development. I had never presented to an audience larger than 20 people, and certainly never to corporate executives whose decisions could affect millions of users worldwide. But as I began explaining the technology's capabilities, my nervousness disappeared and was replaced by the confidence that comes from knowing you have created something genuinely revolutionary. The audience was silent, absorbed in demonstrations that were unlike anything they had seen before. The questions afterward were sophisticated and detailed, coming from engineers and executives who clearly understood the implications of what they were witnessing. Several people asked about patent protection and licensing opportunities, while others wanted to know about scalability and manufacturing requirements. But it was Jonathan Walsh's reaction that mattered most, and I could see the recognition in his eyes growing stronger with each demonstration. He was seeing the same potential that had kept me working in my garage until dawn, the same vision of technological transformation that had sustained me through years of family skepticism and financial sacrifice. When he stood up to address the audience, I knew that everything was about to change. That was when he said the words that would echo in my mind forever, the moment when 5 years of secret work became public vindication in the most spectacular way possible. The presentation theater fell completely silent as he spoke, and I could feel hundreds of pairs of eyes turning toward me with a new kind of respect and recognition. Sarah and Mike were somewhere in that audience, having arrived that morning as a surprise to support my presentation. But they had no idea they were about to witness the complete transformation of their understanding of who I really was and what I had been doing in that garage all those years. The words came out clear and strong, carrying across the packed presentation theater with the weight of absolute authority. Jonathan Walsh stepped forward to the microphone, his silver hair catching the stage lights as he surveyed the audience with the confidence of a man who had built one of the world's largest technology empires. His voice carried that particular quality that comes from decades of making announcements that reshape entire industries, calm and measured, but somehow electric with possibility. I could see Sarah 3 rows back, her nurse's uniform replaced by the black dress she wore to important occasions, her face a mixture of confusion and growing awareness that something unprecedented was happening. Mike sat beside her in his best suit, the one he wore to pharmaceutical company award dinners, but his usual confident expression had been replaced by something I had never seen before, a kind of stunned recognition that the world was not what he thought it was. The CEO's words hung in the air like a revelation waiting to unfold, and I found myself thinking back to the moment 6 months earlier when this entire sequence of events had been set in motion. It was a cold February morning when my patent attorney called with news that would change everything, though at the time it felt like just another step in a process that had already consumed years of my life. His voice was unusually excited as he explained that Empire Corporation had not only reviewed my patent application, but had fast-tracked it through their internal evaluation process with a priority rating reserved for breakthrough technologies. They wanted to meet immediately, not through intermediaries or corporate development staff, but with their senior technical leadership team in a private session that would determine whether my garage invention deserved their full attention. The first meeting took place in a nondescript office building in downtown Seattle, chosen specifically because it would not attract attention from industry observers who monitored Empire Corporation's more obvious facilities. I arrived 2 hours early and spent the time in a nearby coffee shop, reviewing my presentation materials and trying to calm the nervous energy that had been building for weeks. The technology worked perfectly in controlled conditions, but I had never demonstrated it for people whose expertise might reveal flaws that I had missed during my solitary development process. My hands were shaking slightly as I carried the equipment cases through the lobby, past security guards who had been expecting me but still seemed surprised to see someone who looked more like a suburban hobbyist than a cutting-edge technology developer. The conference room on the 15th floor overlooked Elliott Bay, with floor-to-ceiling windows that provided a view of cargo ships and ferry boats moving through the gray winter waters. The Empire Corporation team was already assembled when I arrived, 5 senior engineers and 2 vice presidents who had cleared their schedules to evaluate what their preliminary analysis suggested could be genuinely revolutionary technology. Dr. Patricia Chin, their chief technology officer, introduced herself with the kind of professional warmth that suggested she was genuinely curious about what I had created rather than simply performing due diligence on another routine patent review. Her questions during the next 3 hours demonstrated a depth of technical understanding that made me realize I was finally speaking with people who could fully comprehend what I had accomplished. The demonstration went better than I had dared to hope, with the technology performing flawlessly under conditions that were far more demanding than anything I had tested in my garage laboratory. The Empire Corporation engineers asked detailed questions about processing algorithms and data structures that revealed they were thinking about applications I had never considered. ways the technology could be integrated into existing systems to create capabilities that neither of us had imagined independently. Dr. Chin was particularly interested in the predictive modeling aspects, recognizing immediately that the system could anticipate user behavior with accuracy that would revolutionize how people interact with digital devices. Her excitement was contagious, and by the end of the session I felt like I was part of a team working toward a shared vision rather than an outsider trying to prove his worth. The legal negotiations that followed were unlike anything I had experienced during the initial patent process, involving teams of corporate attorneys who specialized in emerging technology acquisitions. Empire Corporation's offer was structured as a comprehensive development partnership rather than a simple licensing agreement, recognizing that the technology's full potential could only be realized through massive investment in research, manufacturing, and market development. They wanted exclusive rights to commercialize the innovation, but they also wanted me to lead the development team that would turn my garage prototype into a consumer product that could reach millions of users worldwide. The financial terms were beyond anything I had imagined when I first started tinkering with circuits in my suburban workspace, but the partnership structure meant that success would be measured in years rather than months. The non-disclosure requirements became even more stringent once the corporate partnership was formalized, with legal language that prohibited me from discussing any aspect of the development process with anyone outside the Empire Corporation team. This meant that my isolation from Sarah and my family actually increased during the months when our financial future was being secured, creating a painful irony that I could only hope would be resolved once the technology was publicly announced. Sarah noticed that I seemed more optimistic about our prospects, but she attributed this to finally getting serious about finding regular employment rather than understanding that I was actually working with one of the world's most innovative companies on technology that would transform entire industries. The corporate development process was both exhilarating and exhausting, involving 12-hour days at Empire Corporation's advanced research facility in a location I was contractually prohibited from revealing to anyone, including my wife. The team they assembled around my technology included some of the most brilliant engineers I had ever met. People who had been recruited from companies like Google and Apple specifically because of their expertise in areas that would be crucial to bringing my innovation to market. Working with them was like being admitted to an exclusive club where the price of membership was ideas that could change the world, and every day brought new insights that expanded my understanding of what we were creating together. Dr. Chin became my primary collaborator during this phase, helping me understand how the technology could be scaled from a garage prototype to a manufacturing process capable of producing millions of units annually. Her background in semiconductor design provided perspectives that complemented my software expertise, and together we solved engineering challenges that had seemed insurmountable when I was working alone. She also became my guide to corporate culture at Empire Corporation, helping me understand how decisions were made and how innovations moved from research labs to consumer products. Her confidence in the technology's potential was reassuring during moments when the complexity of commercialization seemed overwhelming. Mike would have been shocked to learn that I was spending my days in meetings with corporate executives who controlled budgets larger than his entire pharmaceutical division's annual revenue. While he was celebrating quarterly sales figures that represented incremental progress in a mature industry, I was working on technology that could create entirely new markets worth billions of dollars. The irony was that his criticism of my lack of ambition had actual. Why motivated me to pursue goals that were far more ambitious than anything he had ever attempted. But the confidentiality requirements meant I had to absorb his condescension without revealing that I was operating at a level of corporate engagement that would have impressed even his most successful colleagues. The breakthrough that convinced Empire Corporation to move forward with full commercial development came during a late-night testing session in their secure laboratory facility. We had been working on optimization problems that seemed to have no solution, trying to balance processing speed with power consumption in ways that traditional approaches could not achieve. But around midnight, after hours of frustration and false starts, the system suddenly began performing at levels that exceeded our most optimistic projections. The technology was not just working, it was demonstrating capabilities that suggested applications we had never considered, ways of interacting with digital information that would make current interfaces seem primitive and inefficient. Dr. Chin called Jonathan Walsh at home that night, waking him up to report that we had achieved the performance benchmarks that would justify moving into prototype manufacturing. His response was immediate and decisive, authorizing the budget allocations and timeline accelerations that would turn our research project into Empire Corporation's highest priority development initiative. Within a week, I was working with teams of industrial designers and manufacturing engineers who were already planning how to bring the technology to market in quantities that would satisfy global demand. The scale of the operation was breathtaking, involving supply chain partnerships and manufacturing facilities that I had never imagined would be connected to my garage experiments. The security around the project intensified as we moved closer to commercial launch, with access restrictions and monitoring systems that reminded me daily how much value was at stake. I was assigned a corporate security liaison who helped me understand how to protect trade secrets and avoid inadvertent disclosure of information that competitors would find valuable. This meant changing my daily routines and communication patterns in ways that Sarah noticed, but could not understand, creating additional strain in a marriage that was already suffering from my inability to share what was really happening in my professional life. The security officer assured me that the restrictions would be lifted once the technology was publicly announced, but until then I had to maintain the pretense that I was still just an amateur inventor working on hobbyist projects. Empire Corporation's market research indicated that the technology would have applications far beyond what I had originally envisioned, with potential uses in healthcare, education, entertainment, and business communication that could generate revenue streams worth hundreds of billions of dollars annually. Their consumer electronics division was already developing product concepts that would showcase the technology's capabilities in ways that would capture public imagination and drive adoption across multiple demographic segments. The automotive division was exploring integration possibilities that could revolutionize how drivers interact with vehicle systems, while the enterprise software group was designing business applications that could transform how companies analyze and respond to customer behavior patterns. The first functional prototypes were completed in August, sleek consumer devices that bore no resemblance to the crude assemblages of components I had jerry-rigged in my garage laboratory. The industrial design team had created products that were not only technologically advanced, but aesthetically beautiful, with user interfaces that made the revolutionary capabilities accessible to people with no technical background. Testing these prototypes was like glimpsing the future, seeing how human-computer interaction would evolve once the technology reached mainstream markets. Users responded to the devices with a combination of amazement and immediate adoption, suggesting that consumer demand would far exceed Empire Corporation's most optimistic sales projections. Jonathan Walsh Peirce only reviewed the prototype testing results before making the decision to announce the technology at the National Technology Conference, recognizing that the industry's largest gathering would provide the ideal platform for introducing innovation that would reshape competitive dynamics across multiple sectors. His marketing team recommended a presentation strategy that would demonstrate the technology's capabilities while building anticipation for commercial availability. Understanding that the announcement would trigger intense interest from competitors and investors who would want to understand how Empire Corporation had achieved such a significant technological advantage. The weeks leading up to the conference were a whirlwind of preparation and refinement, with teams of engineers working around the clock to ensure that every aspect of the demonstration would showcase the technology's potential without revealing proprietary details that competitors could exploit. I was assigned a presentation coach who helped me develop speaking skills appropriate for addressing audiences of industry leaders and technology journalists, understanding that my performance on stage would influence how the innovation was perceived by people who would determine its commercial success. The pressure was intense, knowing that a single technical failure or miscommunication could undermine years of development work and billions of dollars of investment. Sarah's decision to surprise me by attending the conference with Mike was both touching and terrifying. representing the moment when my secret professional life would finally intersect with my family relationships in ways that could not be controlled or predicted. I had not told them about my presentation because the Empire Corporation marketing team had requested minimal advance publicity to maximize the impact of the announcement. But their presence in the audience meant that the vindication I had been working toward would happen in front of the people whose opinions mattered most to me personally. This was exactly what I had dreamed about during those lonely nights in the garage, but now that it was actually happening, the emotional stakes felt overwhelming. The morning of my presentation, I received a congratulatory message from Dr. Chin wishing me success and reminding me that everyone at Empire Corporation was counting on this moment to justify the faith they had placed in my technology and my ability to represent it effectively. Her confidence was reassuring, but I was still nervous about performing in front of an audience that included not only industry experts, but also my wife and brother who had never seen me in a professional context that matched the significance of what I had accomplished. The demonstration equipment was set up and tested multiple times, every connection verified and every component confirmed to be functioning at optimal levels. Standing behind the stage curtain before my introduction, I could hear the audience settling into their seats and could see the Empire Corporation executives taking their positions in the front row. Jonathan Walsh caught my eye and nodded with the kind of professional encouragement that suggested he had complete confidence in both the technology and my ability to present it effectively. This was the moment when 5 years of secret work would either be vindicated spectacularly or fail in the most public way possible, with consequences that would affect not only my own future, but the futures of everyone who had invested in making this breakthrough commercially viable. The conference moderator was completing my introduction, describing me as the inventor behind Empire Corporation's most significant technological advancement in decades, and I could feel the audience's attention focusing with the intensity that comes when people sense they are about to witness something genuinely important. Sarah and Mike were out there somewhere in that crowd of industry professionals, about to discover that the family failure they had been tolerating for years was actually operating at a level of technological innovation that would command respect from the most sophisticated experts in the field. The curtain was about to rise on the vindication I had been working toward since that first night when I realized what I could create in a suburban garage that corporations with unlimited resources had not been able to achieve. The spotlight illuminated the stage as I stepped forward, carrying the demonstration unit that represented 5 years of secret innovation and corporate partnership development. The audience fell silent with the kind of expectant attention that only comes when industry professionals sense they are about to witness something genuinely revolutionary. I could see Jonathan Walsh in the front row, his expression calm and confident as he prepared to make the announcement that would change everything. Behind him, scattered throughout the packed theater, were the faces of engineers and executives who had traveled from around the world to attend this conference, but my eyes were searching for Sarah and Mike somewhere in that sea of professional attention. When I finally spotted them in the third row, Sarah's expression was a mixture of pride and confusion, while Mike's usual smirk had been replaced by something approaching genuine curiosity about what his supposedly unsuccessful brother was doing on stage at a major corporate presentation. My demonstration began with the basic functionality that had started everything in my garage laboratory, showing how the technology could anticipate user needs with unprecedented accuracy and respond to commands that had never been explicitly programmed. The audience was attentive but not yet amazed, because what they were seeing could have been accomplished through advanced programming techniques that were already commercially available. But as I moved into the more sophisticated applications, demonstrating capabilities that bordered on artificial intelligence, but operated through entirely different principles, I could feel the energy in the room shifting toward genuine excitement. Engineers were leaning forward in their seats, executives were making notes on their tablets, and industry journalists were recording every detail of what they clearly recognized as a significant technological breakthrough. The third demonstration sequence pushed the technology into territory that no competitor had ever approached, showing how the system could learn and adapt to individual users in ways that created genuinely personalized experiences rather than simply customizing existing interfaces. This was the innovation that had convinced Empire Corporation to invest hundreds of millions of dollars in development and manufacturing. The capability that would revolutionize how people interact with digital devices across every aspect of their daily lives. The audience response was immediate and unmistakable, with spontaneous applause breaking out as people realized they were witnessing the introduction of technology that would make current systems seem primitive within a matter of years. But it was Jonathan Walsh's reaction that mattered most, and when he stood up to address the audience, I knew that the moment I had been working toward for half a decade was finally arriving. His voice carried the authority of someone who had built a global technology empire by recognizing innovation before his competitors understood its significance. And every word he spoke would be analyzed and reported by journalists who influenced how the entire industry thought about technological progress. He began by congratulating me on achieving what Empire Corporation's own research teams had been unable to accomplish despite having access to unlimited resources and the most sophisticated development facilities in the world. The recognition felt surreal after years of being dismissed as an amateur hobbyist by the people who knew me best. Then came the words that would echo in my mind forever, the moment when 5 years of sacrifice and secrecy were vindicated in the most public way possible. Jonathan Walsh looked directly at me, then turned to address the packed theater with the kind of announcement that reshapes entire industries overnight. His voice was clear and strong as he explained that Empire Corporation had not simply licensed my technology, but had structured a comprehensive partnership that recognized me as the principal architect of their most ambitious product development initiative in company history. The financial terms he outlined were staggering, involving not just immediate compensation, but ongoing royalty arrangements that would generate income for decades as the technology was implemented across multiple product categories and market segments. But the most important moment came when he turned back toward me and spoke the words that would shatter my family's perception of reality forever. He explained that Empire Corporation's analysis had determined that my innovation represented the foundation for an entirely new approach to human-computer interaction, with applications so broad and valuable that traditional licensing arrangements would have been inadequate to properly compensate its creator. Instead, they had structured a partnership that would make me one of the largest individual shareholders in a new subsidiary company dedicated exclusively to developing and commercializing the technology one had created in my suburban garage. The ownership stake he described was worth more than most people earn in several lifetimes, but more important than the money was the recognition that I had achieved something genuinely revolutionary. The audience erupted in applause that seemed to go on forever, with technology executives and industry journalists rising to their feet in acknowledgement of what they had just witnessed. But I was focused entirely on Sarah and Mike, watching their faces as they processed information that contradicted everything they thought they knew about my capabilities and accomplishments. Sarah's expression moved through confusion, disbelief, and finally a kind of stunned recognition that her husband was not the amateur hobbyist she had been married to for 8 years, but someone who had achieved technological breakthrough at the highest levels of corporate innovation. Mike's reaction was even more dramatic, his usual confidence completely evaporating as he realized that his unemployed brother had been operating in professional circles that dwarfed his pharmaceutical sales achievements. The post-presentation reception was unlike anything I had ever experienced, with corporate executives and venture capitalists approaching me with the kind of respectful attention usually reserved for proven industry leaders. Dr. Chin found me in the crowd and congratulated me on a presentation that had exceeded even Empire Corporation's most optimistic expectations, explaining that the audience response had convinced their marketing team to accelerate the commercial launch timeline by several months. Technology journalists were requesting interviews that would position me as a thought leader in emerging artificial intelligence applications, while competitors were clearly scrambling to understand how a garage inventor had achieved breakthroughs that their massive research teams had missed. Sarah and Mike made their way through the crowd with expressions that suggested they were still processing what they had witnessed on stage. Sarah approached me with a mixture of pride and bewilderment, her nursing background helping her understand that she had married someone whose accomplishments were far beyond what she had imagined possible. She hugged me with an intensity that suggested she was reconciling the man she lived with every day with the technology innovator who had just been recognized by one of the world's largest corporations. Her first words were an apology for not understanding what I had been working toward during all those late nights in the garage when she thought I was just avoiding household responsibilities. Mike's reaction was more complex, involving what appeared to be genuine recognition that his assumptions about success and achievement had been fundamentally incorrect. His pharmaceutical sales accomplishments, which had seemed so impressive during family dinners, suddenly appeared modest compared to technology innovation that would generate revenue streams worth billions of dollars annually. He shook my hand with a formality that suggested he was meeting me for the first time, acknowledging that the brother he had been patronizing for years had actually been pursuing goals that were far more ambitious than anything he had ever attempted. His usual confidence was replaced by something approaching humility as he realized that success could take forms he had never considered. The three of us found a quiet corner of the reception area where we could talk without being interrupted by the corporate executives and journalists who were still seeking my attention. Sarah wanted to understand how I had managed to keep such a significant professional development secret for so long, and I explained about the non-disclosure requirements that had made communication impossible until the technology was publicly announced. She was hurt that I had not been able to share the journey with her, but she also understood that the legal restrictions had been necessary to protect intellectual property that was worth more than we had ever dreamed possible. The isolation had been painful for both of us, but the vindication made the sacrifice feel worthwhile. Mike asked detailed questions about the corporate partnership structure, his sales background helping him understand the financial implications of what Jonathan Walsh had announced on stage. When I explained the ownership percentages and revenue projections that Empire Corporation's analysis had generated, his expression showed genuine amazement that his underachieving brother had negotiated agreements that would make him independently wealthy for the rest of his life. But more important than the money was the professional recognition, the acknowledgement that I had created something valuable enough to command respect from the most sophisticated technology experts in the world. The conversation continued for over an hour, with Sarah and Mike asking questions that helped them understand not just what I had accomplished, but how dramatically their perception of my capabilities had been incorrect. Sarah realized that my apparent lack of ambition had actually been the result of pursuing goals that were so ambitious she could not have imagined them. While Mike came to understand that his criticism of my career progress had been based on assumptions about success that were far too narrow to encompass what I had actually achieved. The dynamic between us was shifting in real time, moving from condescension and disappointment toward respect and genuine curiosity about what came next. Industry journalists approached our small group several times during the reception, requesting interviews and photographs that would document the human story behind Empire Corporation's most significant technological announcement in years. I agreed to brief statements that focused on the technology's potential applications rather than personal details, understanding that public attention would be part of the price of commercial success, but wanting to maintain some privacy during a moment that felt intensely personal. Sarah and Mike were included in several photographs that would later appear in technology magazines and industry publications, positioning them as family members who had supported my innovation journey even when its ultimate destination was unclear. Empire Corporation's corporate communications team scheduled a series of follow-up interviews and appearances that would help introduce me to the broader technology community as a thought leader in artificial intelligence and human-computer interaction. Dr. Chin explained that these public engagements would be crucial for establishing credibility with consumers and enterprise customers who would be evaluating whether to adopt new technology from a previously unknown inventor. The attention was flattering but also overwhelming, representing a level of professional responsibility that I had never experienced during my years of solitary garage development. The flight home to Seattle felt like a journey between two different worlds, leaving behind the corporate recognition and media attention to return to the suburban neighborhood where I had spent years being dismissed as an amateur hobbyist. But everything had changed during those 3 days in Chicago, not just my professional status, but the fundamental dynamics of my relationships with the people who mattered most to me. Sarah spent the flight asking questions about the technology's capabilities and commercial potential, demonstrating genuine curiosity about work that she had previously considered a waste of time and money. Her questions were intelligent and insightful, revealing that she had simply needed context to understand what I was trying to accomplish. Mike's transformation was even more dramatic, as he processed the realization that his supposedly unsuccessful brother had achieved the kind of breakthrough that technology executives spend entire careers hoping to discover. His pharmaceutical sales experience gave him a framework for understanding the commercial implications of what I had created, and he was genuinely impressed by the scale of the opportunity that Empire Corporation's partnership represented. For the first time in our adult relationship, he was asking for my advice rather than offering unwanted guidance about career development and professional responsibility. The return to our suburban home felt surreal after the intensity of the corporate conference environment, but the familiar surroundings also provided perspective on how much my life had changed during those crucial days in Chicago. The garage where I had spent years working in secret now seemed like a shrine to persistence and vision. The place where genuinely revolutionary technology had been developed using equipment that most people would have considered inadequate for serious innovation. Sarah walked through the space with new appreciation for what I had accomplished there, understanding for the first time that the cluttered workbench and jury-rigged testing equipment represented the birthplace of technology that would affect millions of users worldwide. Our first dinner together after returning from Chicago was unlike any meal we had shared during our 8 years of marriage, with conversation focused on future possibilities rather than current frustrations. Sarah was excited about the travel opportunities that would come with my new role as Empire Corporation's primary technology liaison, while also expressing concern about how public attention might affect our privacy and family life. I assured her that my primary commitment was to our relationship and that professional success would only be meaningful if it enhanced rather than complicated our life together. The money would provide security and opportunities, but the recognition and respect were what made the achievement personally satisfying. Mike called that evening to continue our conversation from the conference reception, asking more detailed questions about the technology's development timeline and the corporate partnership structure. His tone was completely different from the condescending advice sessions that had characterized our previous interactions, replaced by genuine interest in understanding how I had navigated challenges that were far more complex than anything he had encountered in his pharmaceutical sales career. He admitted that he had seriously underestimated my capabilities and apologized for the dismissive comments he had made during family gatherings over the past several years. The first corporate quarterly review meeting took place 6 weeks later, bringing together Empire Corporation's senior leadership team to evaluate progress on commercializing the technology and planning for market launch activities. I participated as a full partner rather than a consulting inventor, with decision-making authority over technical specifications and product development priorities that would determine how millions of consumers experience the innovation I had created. The meeting lasted 3 days and covered everything from manufacturing scalability to marketing strategy, giving me insight into how major corporations transform breakthrough technology into commercial success. Dr. Chin reported that initial production runs had exceeded quality expectations while meeting cost targets that would make the technology accessible to mainstream consumer markets. The manufacturing team had solved integration challenges that had seemed insurmountable during early development phases, creating production processes that could scale to meet global demand while maintaining the performance standards that made the technology revolutionary. Her confidence in the commercial prospects was infectious, reinforcing my belief that the years of sacrifice and secrecy had been justified by creating something that would genuinely improve how people interact with digital devices. Jonathan Walsh used the quarterly meeting to announce Empire Corporation's decision to accelerate the public launch timeline. Recognizing that competitive advantages in technology markets are often temporary and that early market entry would be crucial for establishing dominant market position. The acceleration meant that consumer products incorporating my technology would be available within 18 months rather than the 3-year timeline that had originally been projected. This timeline compression required additional investment in manufacturing capacity and marketing infrastructure, but the potential revenue opportunities justified the accelerated spending. The media attention surrounding Empire Corporation's technology announcement continued to grow as industry analysts recognized the commercial implications of what had been demonstrated at the Chicago conference. Technology magazines featured detailed articles about the innovation's potential applications, while business publications focused on the corporate partnership structure that had made development possible. I was invited to speak at additional conferences and industry events, positioning me as a thought leader whose insights would influence how the technology sector approached similar challenges in the future. Sarah adapted to the increased attention with grace and intelligence, understanding that public recognition was part of the price of achieving the kind of breakthrough that would reshape entire industries. She was proud of what I had accomplished, but also protective of our privacy, helping me navigate media requests in ways that satisfied public curiosity without compromising the personal relationships that mattered most to us. Her nursing background provided valuable perspective on how technological innovation could improve people's lives, and her questions often helped me think about applications that I had not previously considered. Our relationship with Mike and Jennifer evolved significantly as they processed the reality of what had happened and what it meant for our family dynamics going forward. Mike's competitive nature initially struggled with having his previously unsuccessful brother achieve recognition that exceeded his own professional accomplishments, but his basic decency ultimately prevailed, and he became genuinely supportive of the opportunities that were opening up for Sarah and me. Jennifer was fascinated by the technology's potential healthcare applications, recognizing that innovations in human-computer interaction could revolutionize how medical professionals deliver patient care. The first commercial products incorporating my technology were launched exactly 18 months after the Chicago conference announcement, with consumer response exceeding even Empire Corporation's most optimistic projections. The devices sold out within hours of becoming available, with waiting lists that stretched for months as manufacturing capacity struggled to meet unprecedented demand. Technology reviewers described the user experience as revolutionary, confirming that the innovation delivered the transformative capabilities that had been promised during the initial announcement. The commercial success validated not only the technology's potential, but also the corporate partnership structure that had made rapid development and launch possible. 5 years later, as I sit in the home office that has replaced my garage laboratory, I often reflect on the journey that transformed me from a dismissed amateur hobbyist into a recognized technology innovator whose work affects millions of users worldwide. The financial success exceeded my wildest expectations, but more important was the personal vindication of proving that persistence and vision could overcome the skepticism of people who measure achievement only through conventional metrics. Sarah and I have traveled to conferences and corporate facilities around the world, but we still prefer the quiet suburban neighborhood where the breakthrough first took shape in a cluttered garage that nobody thought was suitable for serious innovation. The technology continues to evolve through ongoing collaboration with Empire Corporation's research teams, but the core principles that made the original breakthrough possible remain unchanged. Innovation requires patience, vision, and the courage to pursue goals that other people cannot understand or appreciate until they see the results. My relationship with Mike has become genuinely collaborative, with his business experience providing valuable insights into market development, while my technical background offers perspectives that help him understand how emerging technologies might affect his pharmaceutical industry. We have both learned that success takes many different forms, and that assumptions about other people's capabilities are often completely incorrect. The garage where everything started has been converted into a proper office space, but I have kept the original workbench as a reminder of where the journey began and what is possible when you refuse to accept other people's limitations on your potential. Sarah uses the space for her own projects now, having left nursing to pursue interests that our financial security has made possible. She often mentions how proud she is that she married someone with the vision and persistence to pursue dreams that seemed impossible to everyone else, and I am grateful that our relationship survived the secrecy and isolation that were necessary to protect the innovation until it was ready for public recognition. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I had given up during those difficult years when the technology seemed too complex and the corporate partnership too unlikely to ever materialize. But persistence has its own logic, and breakthrough innovation requires the willingness to continue working toward goals that other people cannot see or appreciate. The recognition from Jonathan Walsh and Empire Corporation was gratifying, but the real satisfaction comes from knowing that I created something genuinely valuable that will continue improving people's lives long after the initial excitement has faded into technology history. The story I have shared with you today is about more than technology or corporate success or family vindication, though all of those elements played important roles in how everything unfolded. It is fundamentally about the courage to pursue your vision even when the people closest to you cannot understand what you are trying to accomplish. Innovation requires loneliness and sacrifice, but it also offers the possibility of creating something that changes the world in ways that justify every difficult moment along the journey. If you have a dream that other people dismiss as impossible, remember that the most revolutionary breakthroughs often come from the most unexpected places, and that persistence combined with vision can overcome any obstacle that stands between you and the vindication you deserve.